to Face to Face with me, Azad Ali. We're continuing the theme of Islamophobia, and this week in particular, we're looking at hate crime and discrimination. And alhamdulillah, in the studio, I have Huda Osman, who's a caseworker at MEND, Muslim Engagement and Development, and Faiza Mukith, who's head of legal also at MEND. Assalamu alaikum, sisters. Jazakumullah khair for joining us. Perhaps I'll start with you, Huda. What do you do at MEND?
So at the IRU, the Islamophobia Response Unit, we are basically the third-party reporting unit who deal with cases of hate crime and discrimination. So how it works is a case will come through to us through our three main reporting ways, and it's via email, or our reporting webpage, which is found on the MEND website, or our phone lines, our separate IRU phone line. And what my role is to actually respond to all of those, and then eventually at one point I will also take cases or allocate them to other people.
Okay, and Faiza?
Yeah, so I am the head of legal of the Islamophobia Response Unit. So I'm essentially an in-house lawyer. So whenever we do get a case and we see that it is a legal case and we want to challenge either the perpetrator or the employer that's discriminated against one of our victims, we take the case on, and I'm essentially like the legal supervisor on the case.
Right, okay.
So we provide actual legal advice to victims of Islamophobia.
Okay, and in terms of, the kind of things that you get, people call you up about, what are the things that people come to you for?
So they vary. We have loads of different categories.
Sure.
So just looking at the hate crime side, because that's the unit that I mostly take care of, it's verbal. Physical, we've had cases of attempted murder.
Murder?
Yeah,
wow.
Attempted murders through just what's it called? Runovers, attempted runovers.
Yeah.
We've had hate speech as well. Hate speech is on the rise. In terms of hate speech in the cyber world and hate speech verbally, on the ground, we try to separate the two to see if there's a difference and the rise in both. But that's the sort of hate crime each side. And Faiza can probably describe best.
I mean, the type of discrimination cases, is it what is it to do with employment? I don't know.
Yeah, so we get a lot of workplace discrimination cases. So it varies. Sometimes we have cases where there's employees who have been denied promotions because they're bearded or they have a hijab on. So you get those kind of discrimination cases. And we also have unfair dismissal. So they're dismissed actually for, say, for example, praying whilst at work. So the interesting thing is...
I mean, it's shocking that someone can get dismissed because they prayed.
Yeah, and the sad reality, that's actually on the rise.
Wow.
So in terms of our statistics, we're seeing a rise in discrimination in the workplace as compared to hate crime, as you hear, the gory stuff on the streets. But yeah, the discrimination cases are on the rise, and it varies. And we also have cases in schools as well. So the school uniform cases where there's students who aren't allowed to wear their hijab or aren't given the facilities to pray. So we advocate for that as well.
Okay, so I mean, in terms of demographics, the calls, the emails and everything else, I mean, what is it? What's the breakdown?
So in terms of looking at females in general, they make up about 50% of all of our reports. And when I say all reports, I mean both discrimination and hate crime.
Right.
When we look at hate crime specifically, women are making up to 58% of our reports.
Right.
And then recently I did an analysis into that and just looking specifically at what are women reporting and who specifically, when you say women, what is she dressed like? And it's normally women who are overtly, you can definitely see them on the road, you can identify that, yeah, that's a Muslim. And I find that a lot of the time, majority of them are either wearing a hijab or niqab. And also what's quite sad as well is, as Faiza mentioned previously, schools. Because of the amount of schools that have now wanted to ban the hijab, our increase in terms of even looking at the age of women has also become a younger demographic as well. And it says that there's young kids from the ages of foundation years that are basically their parents are reporting on their behalf saying that, look, my kid can't wear the hijab, they want to wear the hijab just like a normal child wants to copy their mum. But they're being stopped because the school are now, most schools are trying to impose a ban on hijab.
Right. I mean, all of this stuff that Huda just mentioned, I mean, you can't surely just deal with one by one. I mean, is there a holistic way you're looking at this?
So the way we approach it is, so myself and Huda, we're the full-time staff members at the IRU. We've got admin support as well, but much of the work that is done is by our volunteer legal supervisors and our volunteer caseworkers. So we have about 15 legal supervisors up and down the country, and they're all lawyers who just want to help. So they volunteer their time to us. And the caseworkers are actually trained by us, and they could be law students who just want to get involved, get some experience as well, and are really passionate about eradicating Islamophobia.
Right.
So our caseworkers are trained by us, and then we hand the cases over to them. So since the opening of the IRU, it's been open for about a year and a half. We've had about 580 cases.
Okay.
And it's shocking to say how many cases we've already had, and it's not stopping as well.
Yeah.
No, but when looking at the amount of cases, when you break it down, discrimination, hate crime, and I think it's important just to see.
Yeah.
I believe it's 58% of our cases are actually hate crime crime cases, whereas only 37 of it is actually discrimination.
Right.
But like Faiza said, in the recent years, it's either that people are learning now that, if you report a crime, you go straight to the police, or discrimination and the way Islamophobia is being imposed has changed from a physical aspect to a more discreet, being imposed via their workplace and other discrimination.
I mean, do you think the people that are coming to you, obviously they're brave and courageous enough to come to you. Do you still feel that maybe not everyone is coming? People don't feel there's a point. Maybe nobody can help. Do you have that feeling?
Yeah, 100%. We often get cases where they've already come to us, and then we guide them through the process. Have a soft conversation with them at first and give them that emotional support, and then say to them, look, these are your options, this is what we can do for you. And sometimes they just back out and they just say, this is too daunting, this is too scary, we don't want to go ahead with it. But we at least encourage them to report it to the police, because that plays a huge part. And sometimes we even get cases where they say, we don't want any charges, we don't want any legal repercussions, we don't want to go through legal proceedings, but we want the police to know that this is happening. Hence why the stats have changed significantly, and now there's more funding in the police where they have to actually look at hate crime and see it for what it is and how often it's happening to Muslims.
Right. And do you think that fact that people, they come and they change their mind, they could change it for various reasons, but do you think there's trust, or do you think Muslims are feeling confident that if they did come, the police would do something, or it's worth it?
I think when you're looking at that, it's quite tricky, because when I'm dealing with majority of my hate crime cases, unfortunately, we're top in terms of first thing we need to do is report and let the police investigate, because at the end of the day, us caseworkers, we can't go underground and pick up all the evidence. And then but a lot of what response we're getting is no further action, NFA, from the police. And that's disheartening to hear, because that's a large proportion of our cases that are being reported.
Well, why do they give reasons why they're not going to?
It's just lack of evidence.
Right.
So this normally, when a victim calls us, it's not at the time of the scene. And we would never advise anyone at the time of the scene, we can't run out to the location. But majority of our cases, there's probably something like a lack of CCTV in the area.
Right, sure.
The incident is not being captured, so it's word of mouth. Whereas one of my older cases, actually, she had basically no evidence. The only thing she had was a verbal case. The only thing she had was a photo of the number plate and a very, very vague blurred picture of the actual suspect. The only reason why this case went to court was because there was previous reports about this man doing similar things.
Okay.
And because of that, they believed her and they took it straight to court, and then he pleaded guilty on the day of the court case.
Okay.
But it's the lack of cases going to prosecution is then affecting the amount of people who even feel the confidence that the police will do anything.
But that case, as an example, is pretty much paved the way, because we use that case as a prime example, because the perpetrator actually said to the victim, what are you going to do? Nothing's going to happen to you. Nothing's going to happen to me. So he continued to swear at her, and it was like a generic case. It was in the parking lot, wasn't it? And the perpetrator said, nothing's going to happen to me. And something did happen to him. He was charged, he was fined, and that case went all the way through. And for that victim in particular, she came out as a survivor, and she said, I thought nothing was going to happen. We provided the requisite support, and now we use that as an example. As much as we do get no further action, we still encourage people to report it, and it's really important for us, because then we can kind of change the conversation and try and figure out ways in which we make sure that people are actually taking their phones out, using the materials that they have, or if they've got witnesses or people around them, like we encourage that conversation as well. So if
do you think, do you find the authorities, maybe the police that you're working with, or say it's something to do with employment or something, the company that you're writing to, do you find cooperation or do you find resistance? How do you perceive it?
I think it differs.
It differs. We could talk about the police. I'll talk about employers.
So, because I do deal with some discrimination cases as well, but with police, I think it literally depends on the officer.
Yeah.
So I've had really helpful officers, and I've liaised with them. There's been no problem at all. And then as of recent, I get some threatening emails and just not the best emails, and it comes late at night and it just throws me off the case. And it's a give and take. There will be the good cops, and then there's the other cops who, if I'm being completely honest with you, I do believe that it's also down to the fact that there are a lack of funding going into the police. There's been cut resources. The police can't always attend and give their due right to a case because they're being overloaded with cases. And even one of my ongoing cases now, when I was speaking to the police officer, because it did take a while for us to obtain the statement of the victim, and I was speaking to her, I was like, why is this happening? And she said, if I'm being honest with you, like I can see that she understood the importance of this case, and she didn't want this case to be let go of. But the problem is she had about, I don't know how many other cases she had to deal with. So every time she wanted to attend the scene and help, she just couldn't, because she didn't have the manpower, she didn't have the capacity to actually take on more.
Yeah, no, I think, I mean, definitely, I mean, we've seen with austerity, it's had a big impact. But I think it's quite interesting because if you're getting one, sometimes you're getting someone who's very helpful, sometimes you're not getting someone who's very helpful. To me, it shows that maybe within the police themselves, they don't really have a policy or a framework that makes sure that the officers all behave the same way. And I think that could be something.
Well, I mean, we're in talks actually. We're trying to build our relationships with police officers and the CPS as well, so the Crown Prosecution Service, to tell them that we can provide training, and this is what we've seen on ground, this is what's happening, and actually show them, look, we've had police officers who have been a bit difficult. We can provide, we can show you the work, and we can show you the evidence, and then have that conversation going. So that's another angle that the unit works at as well, building relationships.
What about when you go to, say, employers and everything else? Okay, you know what? Actually, I'm going to let you answer that, but I'm going to pause because we have to actually go to the break. So really getting carried away here. Do join us after the break, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum, welcome back to Face to Face. So just carrying on the conversation, sorry, I stopped you because I was asking, how are you finding responses from, say, employers and others that you're dealing with?
Thankfully, they've been more responsive, and I think it's because employers don't anticipate a response from a unit. Right. Because obviously we're a third-party reporting unit. When we do prepare correspondence and send it on to them, they're mostly shocked. And at first instance, they think, oh, wow, there's an actual dedicated unit dealing with Islamophobia, and what we've done is on the limelight, is under the limelight right now. So we need to deal with them correctly. And I think it helps having the right qualifications and presenting myself as a lawyer to them. And they think, oh wow, like so this employee has really gone out and done their research and got somebody appropriate to represent them. So it has been helpful, and I think that's what victims value the most. Is they often can't bring themselves to write a strongly worded letter, and that's what we provide, and we can do that on their behalf. And we get various, like the spectrum is so wide. Sometimes we get queries for, I don't know how to ask my employer how to take a day off for Eid. We do that. And we also get the really horrible stuff where
I mean, you mentioned at the beginning, someone who lost their job because of prayer. I mean, just tell us a little bit more. I mean, it just sounds to me unbelievable, actually. So
in that instance, it's difficult because obviously there's a whole process under employment legislation, and you have to unpick it. So loads of people are unfairly dismissed, whether it's for race, gender, or faith, whatever it is. And more often, the people that come to us, because they feel like it's because they're Muslim and they're the only Muslim in the entire company. So when it does get to that stage, we do support them in terms of with their grievance. So like we actually bring the complaint on their behalf and support them throughout that whole internal process. So we advise them, guide them, any responses that they might get from the employer, we'll respond on their behalf. And then if it gets to a point where they say the employer isn't forthcoming and says, no, we maintain our stance, we dismiss this person because they're just actually not a good member of staff.
Yeah.
And we think strongly, you know what, this is actually something that needs to be taken forward. We would advise the employee and say to them, look, you need to submit a claim form and actually go through the legal process and bring a claim against your employer. At that point, we don't formally advise victims, and that's something to clarify, but we will handhold them throughout the process.
Sure. So you just, I mean, that's a employment tribunal, and you let legal
and
representatives
we
take
help them with that decision, and we say to them, look, if it's something that you think you can go, it's obviously a very, very long process, but we will support you as much as we can throughout that process, but you're going to have to, you know, fill out the forms and things like that.
I mean, there's an obvious question I want to ask, like, but you might not be able to answer. Let's see. But are there particular types of industry that you're seeing more discrimination in? Like, is it more in the health? Is it more in, I don't know, trucking business? Is it more in supermarkets? Or is it like, do you notice any patterns?
Not really. It actually happens anywhere and everywhere. I think it's
quite widespread in that sense.
The key questions we often ask when I get a case like that is, you compare it to your counterpart. So if I get an employee who feels like they're being discriminated against, I ask them, well, how many other Muslims look like you are in this department or in the company as a whole? And when that person comes forward, it's more often than not that there's no one else that's like them, hence why their case is far more stronger. Right. So it doesn't really matter where, like we get cases from various companies, I won't name any, but we get cases from various companies, and it's companies who don't actually have enough Muslims.
But in their HR policies and things like that, do they not build this in? Isn't it? I mean faith is one of the protected characteristics. So,
yeah, exactly. You know. I mean, there is quotas that they have to meet, but that's not to say every company is following them.
I'm just thinking, someone praying. Yeah. An employer has to facilitate someone's religious thing. Obviously, there needs to be reasonableness in all of these things, but to sack them it seems a bit,
Yeah.
But the thing is, it's never ever, because you've taken one prayer break. It's a series of issues. It's ongoing. They'll be like, okay, that's hindering the willingness to actually fulfill their role. So it's never just a one-off. It's a constant thing. And then it sounds evil, but majority of the time it sounds like there's been a case that's built against that person. Yeah. And they're like micromanaged on another, very intense in comparison to their counterparts, like Faiza mentioned.
I mean, you're dealing with more the hate crime side of things. Is it worse in London? Is it worse up north? I mean, are there any patterns that you've picked up, say, out of the 500 cases you guys been doing so far?
So when I look at majority of my reports, they actually come from the East London region. Right.
So this is quite a popular Muslim populated area, and so it's quite strange. You'd think it'd happen more where there wasn't that many Muslims.
That's what I would have thought of, but sometimes I wonder, is it because we're based in East London, or is it because in East London there's so much activism happening in that area that people actually know about our service? Because majority of the time when I get to call them, we try to log as well how people have come across us, just to understand how we're reaching people, and it's majority of them say, we've heard about you through a friend, and that friend lives in East London.
Right.
So even if they're from not
it's word of mouth, yeah.
But that's not to say we don't provide our services up and down the country. So we get calls from Yorkshire, Birmingham, Manchester, you name it. Yeah. And we've got our legal supervisors up and down the country as well. Yeah. I'm just trying to see is there like a pattern where that more attacks or more discrimination happens in certain parts of the country. But if there isn't, it's too early perhaps to notice that. Okay, so look,
obviously people coming to you traumatized, have been through a horrible experience, and they're looking for some form of redress or justice. Maybe they won't get everything they want, but how would you kind of encourage people? Because look, sometimes I think, all right, the guy swore at me or spat at me or did whatever. Is it worth it? I mean, what would you say to people? Why would it be important that they come to you?
The thing is, with verbal abuse, it's so sad, but it's now normal. So many of my victims come across, and it's just like, until it becomes physical, they won't do anything. And that's something that we've seen. And even one of my cases currently, it's like, oh, she was verbally abused, disregarded it, and escalated. Do you see? And at that point when it escalates, they responded. And the reason why I think it's so imperative that everyone reports, even if it's a verbal comment and you don't want to do anything about it, report it, because what's on statistics will then reflect what people are going to do about it. An example is Waltham Forest, number 4 on in terms of Islamophobic abuse, and according to Met statistics, and we know with Met statistics there's still a hidden picture of crime in that not everything's being reported. But because of the amount of reports that were made from that specific area, both related to our statistics and the Met Police, we were able to put pressure on the council to adopt a definition of Islamophobia. And when that's being done, then victims can understand, okay, look, my council actually have a definition of Islamophobia, therefore they're actually going to do anything, they're going to do something about it, because they recognise it's an issue. And that's why I think, even if you don't want to do anything about it, report it. Because if you want someone to do anything about it, they need to understand that it's actually happening.
Yeah, it's happening. Yeah.
Because it's like with
and I think I agree. I think it creates a picture, doesn't it? If like I said, Waltham Forest, they had this many, so you can do something. I mean, in terms of you're helping people who come into the Islamophobia Response Unit and everything else. But in terms of policy and laws and everything else, do you think there's a need for changes? What do you think is required?
Yeah, absolutely. Just like one small example, I say small, like the Equality Act, and how there's certain protected characteristics and faith and race fall into it. The reason why Muslims aren't as protected as Jews, say for example, is because they're seen as a race and not
faith group, and
we're not seen in the same way. So using these statistics and challenging it from a policy perspective, and having the conversation and being around the table with regards to changes to legislation is crucial, because we're seeing it's intersectionality, isn't it? So we're seeing how majority of our victims are Muslims. They're all Muslims, but it's Muslim women, and it's Muslim women who wear hijab. So there's so many different levels to it, and that all needs to be taken to the table. And just by us documenting it and keeping the statistics and using it in MEND's general wider work with regards to policy and legislation and advocacy, this is what's being fed into it, and this is how we can show them, look, there's more to it, and this legislation needs to change to accommodate everyone.
Do you think, like Brexit and all of that has had an impact?
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
What about comments like, that Prime Minister Boris Johnson made, and all of these things, did they add to it?
We've got actual cases of women who wear the niqab who have been called letterboxes, and the perpetrators actually say to them, if our Prime Minister can say it, why can't we?
Wow.
So that's not surprising. And with regards to Brexit, that has seen a huge spike in the type of hate crime cases that we're getting and receiving. And it's just the general rise of populism. It's the fact that people they feel like they can talk about it, and they feel like they can criticise Muslims for whatever reason. And that's impacted the way in which we've received reports as well.
Okay.
I think it's important to note, because of, say for example, populism and people just writing whatever they want on social media. It's actually quite interesting, because now we're trying to look at how can the laws be stricter around this concept of free speech, and when does free speech, when should you limit free speech? And that's the conversation that now is being brought to the table, because people are exceeding their boundaries when it comes to Islamophobia specifically, because it's like, if we were to write this about any other faith group, it would never be okay. But when it's like, there's that saying that, look, Islamophobia has passed the dinner table conversation. People can say what they want because it's under the bracket of free speech. So
free for all, that's how it feels. Okay, we've come to an end. So if people wanted to kind of contact you guys for help and everything else, where would they go?
They go on the MEND website, which is www.mend.org.uk.
Okay.
We've got a dedicated reporting page. So if you go, they go to the IRU page, or they can email us at
IRU@mend.org.uk.
Brilliant.
Number, I don't know.
Okay, no, that's fine. I think that's plenty enough. Yeah. No, okay. Jazakumullah khair for coming in. It's very useful, and may Allah increase the benefit of the work that you're doing to the community. That's what we have time for. Inshallah, join me next week. Take care. Assalamu alaikum.